What I love to do is introduce the right people to the right people.
I assemble the smartest people I can think of or reach out to carry that conversation, and that's exactly what I've done today.
Please give my panel a round of applause. Welcome. Okay, guys, Jay Martin here, CEO of Cambridge House, and I am right now joined by Minister Ranj Pillai, the Deputy Premier of the Yukon. He's the Minister of Energy, Mines and Resources, the Minister of Economic Development, and the Minister responsible for the Yukon Development Corporation and the Yukon Energy Corporation. I'm also joined by Ann Turner, the Executive Director of Invest Yukon and our Canadian regional partner here at Cambridge House. How are you doing?
Great, Jay. Good to see you.
Excellent, Jay. Thanks for having us.
Good to see you both. So I'm excited to jump into a handful of topics here. We record in the last week, I think 50 conversations, all focused on the resource sector, and jurisdiction has become one of the underlying themes with anybody I'm talking to. It's far more relevant to a resource investor than it used to be. So 2020 was a hot market in the commodity sector, but like rife with complications operationally, financially, et cetera. Yukon had a banner year. And so I want to jump into some of the performance highlights that you could showcase, and then and any specific stories that come to mind that you think investors should be spending time looking at. And Ranj, maybe I'll start with you, hand it over to you to begin.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, 2020, of course, what a year. So much uncertainty going into the early part, just finishing Q1. We all came back from PDAC and quickly found out that the world was changing. What we saw, which was a pleasant surprise, was this real growth in commodity prices. And for us, a destination for gold investment, as well as silver and copper. But what we quickly found out is that we had to work very closely with industry to ensure that we came up with plans and opportunities to make sure that we had exploration happening, because all of a sudden there was a huge amount of interest. More growth than we thought we were going to see going into the start of the year. Right. And at the same time, we had operational mines that we had to support. So, our team on the ground, the government works very closely with industry, and really that's what it was, day to day, making sure that we had alternative isolation planning in place. We had exploration teams out in the field, and that we continued to see Victoria Gold, as well as Minto on the copper side, continue to have a healthy staff and continue to extract.
Yeah, Victoria Gold being Canada's newest producing gold mine. So get into the details a little bit for me. What sort of government initiatives? I mean, because that's quite the situation to manage from your standpoint, right? You've got some very important businesses in your region and unprecedented complications that no one's ever managed before. So walk us through some of the initiatives that you took in that scenario to assist Victoria Gold, Alexco, et cetera, the producing mines in the Yukon.
Yeah, we worked extremely closely with all of these different companies. When it came to really looking at these different isolation plans, we needed to still ensure that we had workers on site. Other parts of Canada shut their mines down. We kept our mines going. To date, we have had no any challenges with health on site of any of those mines. They were leaders in how they put together best practices to keep their staff healthy. There's two jurisdictions in this country right now, provinces or territories, that when you reflect on 2020, that had positive GDP growth. And we're one of them. So, it made a huge impact to our economy. And I think Yukoners saw that. I would break it into three categories, Jay. We had the exploration side of things, where we worked directly with those companies and the sector to ensure that we could get people on site. We got them out to the field. We had the chief medical officer reviewing their isolation planning, which gave us sort of different opportunities and tools to get people out. Same thing we did with Minto and with Victoria Gold. So really hand in hand, making sure that we work with the communities that they operate in, making sure there's flow of communication all the time. So all the stakeholders that were involved understood what was happening. So I think that's part of it. And then on the placer mining side, which was early in the season, not something that people see across this country, but a banner year, the most, from a perspective of value of gold taken out. And so all of those operations that were underway continue to shore up our economy. Two or three things that we did, I think that were, they were best practices in this country. We were out of the gates first on making sure that people could take a bit of time off with financial support to be tested if they needed to. Right. That's something that the federal government essentially looked at our program and adopted. We were first out with a business relief program. So early on, we shored up and took care of all of the fixed expenses that companies had in our territory. We had 500 clients. That was something that, again, looks as best practices for the country. So what that meant was that the service sector that supports the industry were all in place. They were healthy by the time activity began. We made sure that our drilling companies, our expediting companies, were all looked after in Q2. So by the time a late season started, they were ready to deploy. So I think that was also key. And then really just working with individuals, depending on, we put some money in place to shore up some of our frontline workers as well. And okay. There's ancillary benefit of that, really, to make sure our economy was still moving and that these companies, whether it's on the exploration side or on the production side, had access to all the things they need within their supply chain. So I think those are some things that, when we look back and reflect on what happened, they were the right moves, and they certainly helped us to have a foundation in place to have the season that we did. And now we're really excited about 2021.
Awesome. Well, yeah, the proof's in the operation, right? I mean, that's pretty amazing how many, the lack of missed days that your company's experience compared to anywhere else on the planet, truthfully. And I'd love to pass the puck to you and just talk about some of the activity that you're seeing in the Yukon right now, because, maybe historically people associate the Yukon with gold, but, it's not so much the case, right? You've got producing gold, silver, and copper mines. So talking about why investors, de-risking is key point number one. We talked about that, tons of government support. But why should investors look to the Yukon and the variety of projects, exploration, developments, and production that are running right now?
Thanks, Jay. Well, I feel like you built in the answer a little bit there for me, and it is the variety. It's really great that our connection and the thing that we're known for is the gold rush. It's a really beautiful story going back 120 years, and we love that. But what you take from that to today, 120 plus years later, is the diversity of the minerals, and that it is underexplored. And you're in a space where you've got the right ecosystem for exploration to advance projects, to see companies move into production in a whole host of minerals. And I just think it's a very exciting position to be in at the end of 2020, challenging year for everyone, and start 2021 with 3 operating mines. It's been a little while since that. And the 3 operating mines are Canada's newest gold mine, a copper gold mine, and then, a premium silver mine. So, that right there just says, different scale in all these projects, different operation styles, different capacity, and different mineralogy. And they all move forward, move through the system. And that's a pretty exciting place. But I think that's the tick box that you're looking for, right? Is that these projects could move through the system and get to place and be in such a positive place for investors kicking off 2021.
Right. Okay. Now, actually, something else that just came to mind, the most important resource of a resource company isn't always the resource, right? It's the capital and the people, right? And one thing I've noticed as we're looking at the variety of companies up in the Yukon, whether it's Victoria, Alexco, or down to the exploration stage like Banyan, there's a lot of crossover in the boards, I've noticed, right? There's a lot of communal support among these companies, which has got to be a huge asset. So I'd love you to touch on that, and then maybe expand to how does Invest Yukon support these companies, and what do you provide?
Yeah, if I could point to one thing that I think is Yukon's greatest competitive advantage, it's our partnerships. And you see it across the board, whether it's the foundation between governments at a territorial, federal, and First Nation or Indigenous position that we grow from. But, the collaboration that you see between companies, I think, is unprecedented in almost any other jurisdiction. These are people that are friends and colleagues. They trust each other. They get advice from each other. They lend each other equipment or rib each other when they're like, man, I need that drill on my site. Like, right now, can I get an extra one?
Right.
And so when you've got that kind of collaboration, you gain better understanding of the geology, you have better relationships with the supply service that supports the sector, and you're all essentially pulling in the same direction with a very cohesive message, and that is whatever is good for my company is going to be good for whoever's exploring around Andeamri or in the Yukon in general. And that's the foundation of Invest Yukon and Yukon Mining Alliance. It came together because we saw these companies and these projects that had been here for a substantial amount of time, that were well invested, that understood the region, that were really committed to these values of the region in terms of ethically advancing and using innovation to do so, and went, how can we ensure that investors are aware of this? We are a smaller jurisdiction in a very big country, in a very big market. And so, how do you try to punch above your weight in the investment world? And it's through collaboration, getting out there ahead. And, if we can talk about the positive relationship that is in the Nutchinai-Dun traditional territory with Alexco silver mine, Victoria's gold mine, and then you see metallic minerals and their silver all the way around Alexco. You see a new project in Strategic's Mount Hinton. I got to go into the field this year. It was actually a really cool year for me that way and do our virtual tours. But going up to Mount Hinton, when you stand in their mountains, you can actually see the Belkino at it. And I actually got cell service up there, which was fantastic. But the team there was so excited. They were pulling out visible gold on these rocks. And, this is an area that's had 100 years plus of exploration, mostly silver, but there's a brand new placer operation that was in there in the last 2 years. And when you can be in an area for so long and still get this level of excitement and these new discoveries, I think it's a really compelling message. And it's, the sharing of resources between these companies is a big part of making that effective.
Okay, now there's a lot there that I want to unpack. It just a side note: those virtual tours that you produce are amazing, and I want to publish all of those on our channel here. Ranj, I want to pass it back to you and just talk about ESG for me a little bit. And it's a big topic, so maybe I'll, in the context of what I'm hearing from retail investors today, why this matters more to them is because source country is going to become increasingly important when you're looking at exploration, development, and production companies, and for very good reason. So walk me through some of the initiatives that you are undertaking right now to provide a better working environment, ethically, sustainably, et cetera, in the Yukon.
Yeah. Well, I think I would start by saying that the approach on how we speak to the world broadly is I would parallel it to what we see in a lot of jurisdictions when they're trying to encourage tech investment. Anne's put together a really sophisticated approach on how we go out, and government aligns with the Invest Yukon team. So we are consistently have all hands on deck as we go out to look at investors, as we go out to look at new companies. And I think that's, it's important. The same way that Toronto will go after, a tech company to set up, we're out there making sure that we are bringing dollars in and that we have the best companies that are coming to the Yukon. And I think, so that's important. That's how passionate we are and how important it is to our economy. When I think about ESG, again, I think Anne and I, in our discussions this goes back a number of years. I mean, we saw that. We saw it on the horizon. We were speaking to, the global financial players and understood that, wow, we're in a position where a lot of the building blocks of what makes ESG a destination or investment destination, if that's the filter you're looking for, it's here. We knew from an environmental perspective that we had strong rigor in the environmental structure, but we knew that indigenous governments their decision-making was embedded in that. And so you had everybody at the table: federal government, territorial government, and our First Nations governments. From a social perspective, when you have this legacy of mining that goes back to the late 1800s, you consistently learn about maximizing benefit for your communities on the social side and what best practices looks like. I mean, in this case, Anne also wears a hat as president of Women in Mining. So things like that are key. We have ensured that all parts of our population here have opportunities to work in the sector, and how important that is. So I think on the social side, we've been getting in for a long time, and we know how important it is to get that right. And then on governance, I mean, there's something called the Yukon Forum that's really unique, and I want to share it with your listeners today.
Please.
We're the only, I'd say we're the only province or territory in the country that every quarter we have our premier and all of our ministers at the table with the leadership of every First Nation, sitting there discussing priorities. We made a commitment 4 years ago that our government would do that. We have not missed a meeting. We've all come together, and in those we have over a dozen working groups that focus on everything from mining to infrastructure to health and social. So we are consistently at the table, having the smooth conversations, having the tough conversations, but being able to work through those relationships and build our priorities together. And so when you talk governance, it really doesn't get any more progressive than that, than what you see here. It's a best practice across the country. So I think when you put all that together, what our industry figured out very quickly, and what we as well understood was that we're there. We meet the criteria of ESG. So to be open, I have other provinces reaching out to me, other ministers that are in the same role. This last year, myself and the federal minister chaired the mining table, and in those discussions, we had senior people across the country saying, "How do we do that? How do we position ourselves like the Yukon is?" So I think from us, that's we just see an opportunity of growth when sitting down in Bay Street with even understanding what kind of capital is going to be deployed by some of our major banking institutions. They're excited to see jurisdictions like ours position ourselves in this way. I also think that we increased our grassroots support for exploration this year by over $1 million. It's about $2.5 million. And one of the reasons as well, we knew we wanted to make sure that we shored up the industry because of the year we were having. But I'm a signatory to the Canadian Metals and Mines Plan. We're also focused on critical metals. I mean, we want a diverse portfolio of operations here. A clean tech economy. I know you do a lot of work, Jay, on the renewable side. That's some of my work here as well. And we think that we can extract what's needed to have a clean economy in the future in the most environmentally appropriate way. And we're going to do it in partnership with First Nations. Minto is a great example. I mean, you're looking at a partnership, again, that is unique in this country, where a First Nations working hand in hand with Pembridge to ensure they're extracting copper. And again, that's going into this massive demand across the world as we pivot to a clean tech economy. Got it.
Okay. Now, the last thing I want to talk about, it's kind of tying this all together, right? When we look at the resource business, it's inherently high risk. And right now, there's less certainties in general for investors than there ever has been. And so any that we can identify and rely on are vitally important. A big challenge that resource companies are facing, and I think they're going to continue to face, is attracting those inputs, getting their hands on those inputs, whether it's equipment, whether it's people. And you touched on the benefit of collaboration between the companies based in the Yukon, and it's capital, right? And it's interesting. I think I was talking to Tara Christie of Banyan Gold yesterday. Her two largest shareholders are her two neighbors, Alexco and Victoria Gold. And so there's significant advantages to what you've built up there and how you've got everybody working together on a team. On my whiteboard at any given time, I have a list of names. I'm a very people-driven investor, right? And it's maybe 25 names at any given time. I have to see one of those names on a company's directors, executive team, in their shareholder base before I'll really take it seriously. I'm very people-focused like that. But now I also have a list of jurisdictions, because that has increasingly become more of my focus. And it's not as simple as federal, right? Because every province, every state, every region operates independently. So, Anne, you've got the Invest Yukon poster behind you. I want you to just address this. And for anybody who's thinking like that, and investors should be thinking like that, why is the Yukon a safe place for capital right now?
On the people side, I as you said, it's the rocks in the ground, it's the people, and then what you can do with them. And the people who are working in the Yukon have been for a long time. They've really put in the time, they've invested in understanding their projects and understanding how to do business, and understanding the systems that effectively move projects forward. You can have the greatest rocks in the ground, but if you don't know how to work with the community, the government, and move things forward, and even access, the right drill at the right time to get your project going for the season, you're not going to go anywhere, and you're going to fall behind others. And so, those people that have the experience here and that partner with each other really do have that step ahead. And as you said, there's that alliance. There's the alliance of all of us, which is 18 companies that collaborate from a marketing perspective. But the alliance you see on the ground and in money between like the metallic group of companies as well, right? So you've got 3 companies in there advancing their projects and working with their neighbors as well. So that's a really critical piece of moving it forward. And these companies and the people and the teams leading them are incredibly invested in their projects. One of the key things about Yukon companies, for the majority of them, is that their primary project is here in the Yukon. And that's the badge of confidence that they have put into the projects themselves is, they are putting all their energy, all their focus, all their personal investment into these projects. So, when you follow money, I like to make sure that, you invest with people who are investing in themselves. You've got your whiteboard, and that's on my list as well, is making sure people believe in themselves and the projects they're working on, and investing in each other. And so you can see that across the board, as you said, with Alexco, Victoria, and Banyan. So, and those exist kind of across the Yukon. So that's pretty important as well.
They do. Okay, look, Anne, Minister Pillai, it's been great having you on and getting you in front of our audience and diving into the region a little bit more. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time and letting me hit you with some questions, and I'd love to do it again sometime.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.